And we're now recording, so we're happy to have Katie Young here today talking about smartphone videos, something some of you may have been doing in the last year to 2 years and getting some of your promotions out. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors of the Mid-Atlantic Women in Ag program, as well as the collaborators to this project. We do have webinars scheduled through the end of this year, and we're working on 2022. You can follow us on our YouTube channel. Easiest way is to click on or go to this blue link. I'll put it in the chat pod, and you can join that way. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie.
So this is recording successful interviews with your smartphone and things that we'll cover today. Interview tips like relaxing your subject, composition and background, listening, videographer as a director, so your role as a director, what supplies you should have on hand, equipment and setting, things like your sound, picking the right microphone, things that work with your equipment, apps to purchase, phone settings, and then the fun stuff, tripods, grips, all those little extra tidbits. So the first thing to do is talk about your video style. You want to decide right away because it's easy to get too much content, too little content. You want to have a good idea about, worked out with your subject about what your goal is. So what's the goal length? I recommend keeping things short. Very often we think that going longer, we can cover more content, but typically people either don't have the attention span about to follow it, or maybe you have enough content, but you only have really 1 minute of really good, really engaging, really visual content. We tend to try to stick under 90 seconds for social media just because of that attention span thing. And because those tend to do better when you run ads. Voiceover accompanying video and still images. Are you going to have a talking head like me? Or are you going to have somebody narrating your video? Or as another option that's kind of cropping up more and more with modern social media, are you just going to have captions on the bottom? Your interviewee and subject, are they going to provide the main narration, or is that going to be from you or somebody else? Will the interviewer be part of the video, or are they going to be somebody that's off screen, maybe asking questions and asking their subject to restate the question and their answer? A lot of times when you see videos that have been put together, that's what's happening. Actually, the person is restating the question and then giving their answer, so you don't even know that an interviewer is there. Are you going to have a combination of interviews and voiceover? That's always a nice way to kind of break up the visuals of your video so it's not just a talking head. Keep it short, like we said, for social media. Text overlays are great, especially because they make your video accessible to everybody. Are you going to add music? And if you work for a university, what kind of music does your university allow you to use, and do you have to maybe purchase it or have it approved? Credits, partner acknowledgments, disclaimers, justice statements, logos, all of these things need to be considered. And like we said, it's good to have a script. It's good to have somebody that's talking, but if you can prompt somebody to answer in their natural voice, that's going to sound even better. You always want somebody that sounds like they are comfortable instead of rehearsed and stiff. So the first thing you're going to do when you're starting to plan out a video is contact your subject. Talk to them. Explain what you're going to do. Ask them to wear a collared shirt or a coat or vest so that you have something to attach the lavalier mic to. The microphone that you'll see on the upper right-hand side is known as a lavalier mic, and it's just something that's small that clips onto their collar. But as you can see, it can be difficult to do if you don't have a collar. So that's something to consider. Avoid branding unless it's absolutely essential. If you're representing a university, it's not a terrible idea to ask them to wear your university logo, or maybe a shirt in the color of your university's branding. Avoid hats so that you can see their face, and ask them politely to iron their shirt. We've had a number of situations where that hasn't happened, and unfortunately it does come out looking a little rough. It's not something that we can edit in post. So just an example of an email that you might send to them. Um, just thank them for their cooperation, to give them things to do, give them things to avoid, and just overall be polite, um, and be specific. Give them date, time, and maybe push your time a little bit early, so that everybody shows up on time and that you can talk to them and walk them through any of the changes or suggestions that you've given them. So on video day, that's when the magic happens. You're going to hand them the mic and the cord, and you're actually going to ask them to walk that cord for the lavalier mic up their shirt. We found that it's better to just ask them to do it. That way you're not making anybody uncomfortable, and also they can kind of deal with any issues they have with their clothing. They want to run it up so that the lavalier mic is hanging out the top of their shirt, and then you can help them find a place to hook it, maybe on their lapel or on the edge of their shirt or jacket. Give them a confidence boost. Tell them that the most poised professionals always get nervous and that it's totally okay. You know, I tell people, um, don't don't worry about, you know, looking goofy in front of me. I'll only take the best parts of the video. Feel free to restate anything you want to restate. Feel free to start over when you need to, and that this is a total normal thing to do and that they don't need to worry about it. So when they're done speaking, relax, look passively at the camera. You don't want them to finish speaking and then say, okay, was that good? Because then you only have a slight millisecond to edit the end of that video and to get a good clean clip. You want them to state what they're saying and then take a few breaths, looking at the camera, maybe smiling politely, looking passively at the camera. That's when it's going to give you some room to edit, and them a little room as well to relax before you move on to the next item. And then cut and fade with a 1, 2, 3 countdown, and then nod for action. You don't want to say, okay, go, and then them start right away. In the past, I've had that happen where maybe somebody said that and you're actually talking over that person a very slight bit. That can be difficult to edit out. What you want to do is get a clean cut in the beginning and in the end. And in the beginning, if you start the camera and then say 3, 2, 1, and then nod, not only are you giving them a cue, but you're also silent, so you're not taking the chance of speaking over them. So when you're filming people, early morning or late afternoon during the magic hour are ideal times because your light is going to be a little bit better. You don't want the sun coming directly down on their head. It's not going to be a great look. If you haven't heard of magic hour, it's that hour right before the sun goes beneath the maybe trees or beneath the horizon, depending on where you are, that the sun is just lower on the horizon and everything's golden and lit up. A lot of photographers use this time or try to mimic this time when they're taking photos because it looks so great. Same thing in the early morning. You're going to have sun coming in from the side, illuminating their face. Overcast days also work well because you don't have that harsh lighting from any angle. The light should face the person, so you don't want it to be coming from behind them or over their head. Try not to zoom in during your interview because you don't want to have to go back in and try to match your cropping so that their face is in the same position. Once you've set how far zoomed in you want to be on your person, you do want to leave it there. You don't want to give everybody motion sickness. Don't film at noon. Like we said, you don't want it to be overhead. Bring water, clean small towels, paper towels in case they sweat a little bit, especially during the summertime. It also doesn't hurt to have an assistant of yours. Maybe bring a white reflector that you can buy anywhere online like Amazon. I've even seen people use a large piece of paper, glossy paper. What that's going to do is that's going to take the light that is around them. It's going to bounce it off that white paper very, very gently and fill in the shadows that are on their face so that the filming comes out even better. So when you're cropping and zooming into your person, you want to use something that we call the rule of thirds. And this is the shot that's the most flattering. It avoids you looking at people's hands that maybe they tend to fidget when they talk. You don't see their stomach, you don't see their waist. Wider and tighter shots can be added, but when you're doing a question and answer sequence, that's not ideal. You want to be able to see everything like we call head and shoulders. So head and then down to their shoulders. Initially, you don't have to zoom in quite this far. If you want to zoom out just a tad bit and crop it in later when you're editing your video, that's fine as well. But you can also tell that in this picture of this gentleman, not only is this avoiding kind of the issue of hands and seeing fidgeting and seeing if he's sitting or standing, but you're also giving him room to gaze in a certain direction. If he was right in the center, and you might wonder what he's looking at off camera, but when you move him slightly to the side, slightly in the middle of this line, right on the right hand side, he can look ever so slightly over to one side, and it almost gives him room to gaze at something. It might not feel natural when you're actually filming, but when you watch the film back, if you were to place this gentleman in the middle and then place him again in this location, it does sort of give everything kind of room to breathe. It's almost like in design what we call white space. You don't want to have your entire frame filled. You don't want everything to be completely centered on the page. Sometimes when you give things a little bit more room to breathe, everything looks a little bit better. So for those videographers out there, you want to avoid windy days. I can't tell you how many times in my previous job I had to do filming at the beach, which can be particularly difficult, and it's almost always windy there. And you just hear this roar in the background, or even worse, maybe you don't hear your subject at all. Beware of what's going on in the background. Are people walking by? Are they stopping and trying to wave? Is there maybe junk in the background or trash if you're in a public place? You want to make sure that you are placing the microphone in their lower upper chest, like the diagram and like this gentleman with the Rode mic is demonstrating. That way you're giving yourself the best chance to be able to hear them. Is there anything going on in the background that can be either distracting visually or distracting with the audio? Maybe you're filming near a street and a trash truck decides to come by. That's going to be problematic. We film a lot of times near the Dover Air Force Base, and we have to pause when a plane goes over because you won't be able to hear your subject. All things to consider. Maybe warn your subject about that you will be pausing if that happens. That way they're not caught off guard and maybe nervous that they're doing something wrong. Decide on your composition. Don't vary too much with your zoom like we said before. Try to keep things relatively consistent and keep your camera on the subject for the entirety of your footage. You can always go back in and add what we call B-roll, which is cutaway to different maybe scenes that you want to use to illustrate your point. Those can be added later. It's best not to add those in on the fly because then you can't do a whole lot of editing. So just get a clean cut of your subject talking, and then later you can go back in and add those other items. Directing your subject. Ask them to introduce themselves and give their full name. Don't assume that you know how you want it to be spelled. Ask them to spell it out. That way you have it on footage and you can always go back and reference it. Or if you have to give the footage maybe to an intern or to an editor that's outside your organization, they'll have that information as well. A lot of times you're going to be putting their names in the lower third, kind of like our Zoom and webinar names. And you want to make sure that you have it spelled correctly, that you have their title spelled correctly. It's always good to have this on a recording. Start with a hook. Maybe consider a question or a problem that needs to be solved in the video that you're going to answer for your audience. And be upfront about that. Ask your subject to state that question, and then maybe then give them the audience the answer. Watch for any strange things they might be doing with their face, any grimaces, eye rolling. If they look stressed out, stop, take a break, have them get a drink of water, and maybe talk them through any stress that they might be having. Lead them with questions. If they're stuck, if they look like they're not really sure where to go next, ask them a question. Sometimes when you are filming as well on the fly, you might deviate from your list of questions that you have. You might think of something, maybe you're watching the interview like your audience might be watching it and think, oh, we didn't address this. Once they've stopped speaking, then you can ask a follow-up question and you can cut those segments together so it looks natural. Don't be afraid to prompt them when needed. All answers should add context to the question, so that's where they should restate the question. If you're asking them, why is the sky blue? Their answer shouldn't be, well, here's why. Here's why what? Their answer should be, the sky is blue because, and then they can answer your question. That'll let you cut out the actual question in your editing and then have a natural flow to your speaker. Always pause between your questions and answers so you can get that clean cut in there. Encourage them, be kind, be animated, make them feel at home. Encourage natural breaks in their sentences. Those things can be edited out. Remind them to look into the camera and either smile or fade out like we talked about earlier, that 1, 2, 3, and give them a little bit of a breath at the end of each question. Keep them to a time limit. There have been times where I needed to do an interview and the video was only going to be a minute long, but I had 20 minutes of video. Not only does that make it hard to edit, but it encourages your subject to speak longer than they would have. If you need to go for brevity, be upfront that that's what you're going for. And if they're running a little bit too long, maybe say something like, that was great. How could we say this in a way that's shorter and refilm? That way you have a couple of different takes. Like we talked about earlier, bring a whiteboard, but you could also bring it for a script if you wanted to put bullet points maybe and have somebody stand just behind the camera or just off to the side. That way they can look at the bullet points without having their eyes going across the screen like they're reading. Pay attention to the blocking and to the background, so that rule of thirds. Pay attention to what's going on behind you, and always consider that things like street noise can be a problem. Like I mentioned earlier, let them know that you'll stop if anything gets too loud, that it's not them, that you might just have to rewind a little bit and restate things. So, important points about paying attention to the background. We've all seen these interviews where people are doing a very, very serious interview, and maybe, I want to say at the beginning of the pandemic, a gentleman was working from home and his kid came running in, and then his wife came running in right behind the kid. And it was very cute. We all loved it. It's endearing, but you don't want to have to reshoot things. So things that you should consider in the background, other than whether or not somebody could run in a door, or maybe a pet. Is your company or organization's brand visible? If you're filming for UD, maybe put a UD mug or a hat strategically placed behind you. If it's at a desk, make sure that there's no personal information sticking out, phone numbers, addresses, that sort of thing. Are there books behind your subject? What titles of these books are there? Is there anything that could be misconstrued? Does it look messy? Is it overly political or overly religious? Does it just look bad? Like maybe there's rusted farm equipment or trash, or maybe somebody's license plate. Take stock of these things. Make sure that you have a background that you want to have, and just avoid any issues to start with. You never have to want to go back in and refilm something for something so little like somebody's license plate or somebody's phone number showing. So this is you, the videographer as the director. Listen for any uptalk. Uptalk would be when you end a sentence that goes up like this. it can make you sound very uncertain of what you're doing, and it can make your subject sound a little bit annoying to listen to. People tend to do that when they're not certain about what they're saying. You want to encourage them to be confident in their sentences, be confident in their points, and not end their sentences like this. Did they say something interesting? As I mentioned earlier, follow up on it, even if it deviates from your list of questions. If they said something that you think might be a great addition to your talk, encourage them, ask them a follow-up question, encourage them to expand on that more. If it's too much content, you can always cut it out, but if not, you have something new and exciting to add to your video. Feel free to deviate from the script. Encourage them to slow down. When people are nervous, particularly when they're on film, they will speak rapidly and they won't even notice it. So you might have to do a take and say, that was great. You're speaking a little bit fast. Can we take a few minutes to just breathe and then go back and just make sure you're slowing down? It might feel a little bit unnatural to them to slow down, but it's all in their head. It's usually the fact that they're nervous keying them up, that they feel like slowing down is too slow. But when to you and the audience, it feels completely natural. Don't be afraid to say, that's great. Let's try that again. Aim for something that mimics natural conversation. Ask questions, prompt them. It can all be edited. Like we said, use a whiteboard for bullet points. Allow that also to serve as a focal point to them. If you, like in this picture, want to set up your camera just off of the bulletin board that they're going to be looking at, you don't want their eye to dart to the side and then back at the camera. You want the camera to be as close to their whatever prompt they're using as possible. So maybe they'll have a bulletin board here with information, and they'll look here. It doesn't look too bad to look just off camera in a video, particularly when it's done that way throughout. You either want them to look directly at the camera during the entire video, or maybe slight off the camera. What you definitely don't want to do is place your points over here and film your subject looking completely off of the camera. That can look a little bit unnatural. Give them the script ahead of time, give them bullet points ahead of time, and encourage them to practice just like they would be talking to somebody, a friend of theirs, or maybe, driving in the car and they're talking to somebody, but they're looking somewhere else. Encourage them to look in the mirror and see, what kind of facial expressions are they making. And just give them gentle guidance. Tell them, don't worry too much. If something looks strange, I'll let you know. We'll edit it out and we'll start over. So let's get into the fun stuff. Michelle has put together a few items that are her must-have equipment. These are all items that we have in each county office that we have available for our agents to use. And the reason that we selected these is because they're both affordable and they work well. So they're all things that we've tested out, that we found work reliably and that work well. The first item is the Rhodes Lavalier SmartLav mic. I mentioned earlier, a lavalier mic is that kind of microphone that clips onto your lapel. This is an excellent microphone. Sometimes when you're working with microphones that are wireless, you can run into connectivity issues. This is the one that we chose to go with because it doesn't have that problem. It is wired. You will probably want to get an extra 20-foot cord. That's about $25 that you can buy. Same brand. It just plugs in and then it plugs into your phone. What's nice about using the wired mic, you don't have to worry about any signal interruptions. You don't have to worry about receivers not having battery. It'll just work. It's compatible with both Android and iOS phones, although you will need an adapter to use with iPhones for that jack at the bottom. It comes with a traditional headphone jack, but if you're using an iPhone, you will need a little extra dongle that slips onto the end of it. It works great. We haven't found any issues with it. It's just something to be aware of. As far as smartphones are concerned, you have a couple of different options for video. If you're going to film just on your smartphone, record it in 1080 HD. That's going to be pretty much 99% of the time the highest quality your phone can handle. It's going to look the best, but you're going to have differences between different types of phones, whether it's the zoom or the audio. And you want to kind of play around with your phone on your own to make sure that you're comfortable with the settings. You always want to record in landscape mode. So landscape mode is this tall, this wide mode. You don't want to film like this. A lot of new media, things that are showing up on TikTok, on Facebook, are filming in what we call portrait mode. And while that's great, for professional video, the standard is still to film this way, because then you get a wider field of view. Maybe you have somebody standing in front of a beautiful field of sunflowers. You want to be able to see them as well as that field of sunflowers. If you're filming like this, you're pretty much going to have room for a person. But if you're filming like this, you can use that rule of thirds and have your person over to the side and have your background be the rest of it. Use a tripod or monopod for stability. If you're just holding like this, you may not be aware of it, but people just tend to sway a little bit, and that can frankly, make people that are watching your video a little seasick, and that's not something that we want. Turn off the notifications on your phone so it doesn't buzz or it doesn't make noise while you're filming. And it never hurts to have an external battery that you can plug in just to keep your phone going. With our phones being capable of doing all these things now, it's excellent, but it does suck your battery down really quickly. So, even though you're turning on the do not disturb, bring an extra battery. It can never hurt. And I did see in the chat, yes, we will send out a list of items for you guys that we recommend to start with. Thank you, Shannon. Some more info for our videographers. Your editors are likely to add in what we call B-roll, so those extra cutaway clips that really jazz up your narration. Give them some choices. Go out and take some B-roll all over the place that might be related to what you're talking about. Did the subject refer to something that's close to them, like in their background, a plant? Maybe you want to get close to that plant and record that for a minute or two to give your editor something to cut away to when your subject is talking about that plant. You could also do 10 to 15-second clips of different types of sections of the plant so that they can cut away to it. Maybe you're talking about a crop. Maybe you're talking about crop disease. Find an example of that crop disease and film in on that. Ask the subject if they have any photos or video of anything that they've specifically mentioned, maybe that you won't be able to find, and you can put that in. Always record more than you need. It never hurts to have a large cache of video that you can use on the fly. So even if you're over recording for this film, maybe you're going to do something in the next year that you want to be able to call back and you don't want to use the exact same film. It never ever hurts to have extra film. Although I will say, Michelle and I have found that if you're going to do that, get an external hard drive for your computer and save your film on that so that you have plenty of room on your computer to still work. Film tends to take up a lot of room, as we've found, and with excessive amounts of B-roll, which we do encourage, that can clog up your computer a little bit. So you might want to actually put that on a separate hard drive. Take still pictures if applicable. You can use those. Pan slowly if you're doing B-roll. So if you're filming and you want to move ever so slowly. Like we said, we don't want to give anybody motion sickness when we're showing them a video. I've been playing around with a drone recently, and it's very easy, specifically with drones, when you're getting B-roll, to move too fast. And I just know looking at the camera and looking at what's coming out of it is going to make people seasick. So just something to consider. And pan your tight shots separately. You can always zoom in on a shot and pan across in editing. So if you feel more comfortable to just leave your camera be and get a minute or so of film, that's acceptable as well. You can always add some movement in a little bit later in the editing process. This is an example of what to do and what not to do. This is what we give to our agents when we have them filming out in the field. We say no vertical video ever. Even if it looks cool on TikTok, it's not going to look cool in a professional setting. So just say no to this. And if you do this, we'll say you're doing a good job. So something to consider sending around when you do video. You want to consider who's viewing your video and what it's going to look like, what screen shape they might be using. Typically, the ratio is going to be 16 to 9. That is the standard for shooting video right now, and that's pretty much what your phone's going to prompt you to do by default. Back in the day, all of our TVs used to be that 4:3 ratio. They were almost square, not quite square. There does tend to be an interesting trend on YouTube to make videos longer than 16:9. I haven't looked into that a ton. It tends to be more music videos and maybe movie trailers that are doing that, but we tend to stick to that 16:9 because people are used to seeing it. It fits well on screen types of different shapes and sizes, and it's just a really excellent default to be able to work with and edit. A good mic makes all the difference. You can play around with it yourself. I encourage you to go out, film your subject for a few seconds with your phone, and then plug in the lavalier mic and film it again. That's going to give you a much more robust sound. It's going to get rid of some of the sounds that are in the air around you. Maybe there's dogs barking off in the distance. Maybe there's birds chirping. Particularly with ag, you're filming outside, so there's a lot of sound and noises that can get in the way. A good mic makes all the difference. If you ever want to upgrade from the lavalier mic that we suggested, that's fine as well. Just make sure you look at the reviews to make sure that that upgrade is going to be something that you want. But we have found with, yeah, the wind is the worst. We found with this lavalier mic that it cuts out 95% of that background noise, including the wind, given that it's not a hurricane. And it's incredibly helpful to get a nice sharp cut of audio. It makes a huge difference. So moving on to other little tidbits and accessories, looking at support and stability. We recommend a lightweight tripod, anything in the $25 to $50 range. It doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to be fancy. In fact, I think the one that I bought was the Amazon, I forget what their brand is. They have an Amazon Basics, that's what it is, brand. That works perfect for me. It goes up to, I think, 6 feet. It can collapse down for carrying. One thing you want to consider is if it is a little breezy out, if it's a lightweight tripod, it could fall over with your phone. So make sure your phone's in a case. That has happened to me before. Luckily, I came out unscathed, but typically that won't be a problem because you're not going to be shooting in the wind anyway. Something that's helpful, a monopod, can be useful for times where you maybe don't have time to set up a tripod that's going to be on three stands. A monopod is just the single. And while it isn't as stable as a tripod, it does give you an ability to carry it around. It's a little more portable, and it is more stable than you just holding your phone. It'll give you a little bit more stability. You just have to have a little more self-control about whether or not you're moving and be aware of that. The smartphone tripod grip. This is the item here on the right-hand side. These are the brand that we use. It's called Manfrotto. These are great. It basically goes on the tripod or the monopod, and it expands for any size of phone. So if you have a smaller iPhone or maybe a larger Android, it will be able to clamp back down on your phone and hold it. And it won't hurt your phone. You can adjust it to be as tight as you need so that it doesn't wiggle around, but that will allow you to use any brand of tripod, any brand of monopod for just $20. So we highly, highly recommend getting either both a tripod and a tripod grip or a monopod and a tripod grip, so that those two things go together to hold your phone. And then things like a gimbal. A gimbal can be used to steady your phone. That would be a little more advanced if you want to step into more advanced filmmaking. We can make recommendations on those as well. Use an app for your phone. We recommend two different phone apps. The first one is Filmic Pro. It's $15 one time. That is tied to your phone and your phone's account. So it's not $15 and you and anybody else on your team can use it. It'll be tied to your phone specifically. Just something to be aware of. But $15 really is not too bad for an app, specifically given the advanced features that it has, and the focusing and the clarity that it allows you to do. For iPhones only, there's another option called Movie Pro. Works just as well as Filmic Pro, has all the same bells and whistles, but it's $6. So depending on what you want your team to use or what phones they have, you have two options for iPhone, one option for Android that we recommend. Both of them work flawlessly. And you may be wondering, why can't I just use the default camera on my phone? Believe it or not, for some reason the apps do look better, and I think it's because they give you access to a wider range of settings that are built into your phone that the default video app doesn't necessarily show you. You can change the aspect ratio. You can change, you can add sepia tones if you want. You can change the zoom. You can make it a little bit more saturated. You can have up on that screen that that ratio that we talked about earlier, that 2/3 ratio. It lets you see if your mic is plugged in correctly, and if it's plugged in correctly, you'll see the microphone input going up and down. So it gives you a lot of extra bells and whistles that are helpful to help you know that you're getting the highest quality footage possible with your phone. And if you want to, play around, test out using your phone's camera default and using one of these apps and see what works best for you. And I would bank on it that the app is going to work slightly better. For advanced videography, you want to set your camera's resolution to 1080 HD. 4K is great, but it's very unlikely that you're going to be watching these on massive 4K televisions. It takes up a ton of room, and frankly, a lot of people can't tell the difference between 1080 and 4K video. So just shoot in 1080 and you're going to be golden. 16:9, like we said, that's that typical widescreen. It's going to look great on PowerPoint, on YouTube, and on 90% of social media. I suppose if you're shooting for TikTok, that might not be the case, and you probably just want to hold your phone the wrong way, like we talked about not doing, and shoot in that ratio. But for professional use, you want it landscape in that 16:9 ratio. You could also do a square 1:1 ratio, but if you are going to do that, like say you're shooting something, I'm trying to remember the name of the brand that does those, Tasty, that does those videos that are all square. They look great on social media, but that's kind of part of their brand, is that it's filmed in a square grid. You want to shoot that way to begin with, because what you don't want to happen is you shoot in widescreen and then you go in to crop it down to a square and realize that your subject can't fit in that square and it doesn't quite look right. So this goes back to what we talked about in the very beginning. Decide what you want to do in the beginning. Decide whether it's going to be in widescreen or maybe in square, and shoot from there. And you can go back and forth within these apps on those shapes. When you are filming outside, you want to use a reflector or a scrim to diffuse the light. Like I said, we've used poster board before, so you don't have to get fancy with it if you don't want to. You can see an example down here on the left-hand side, what it looks like with the harsh lighting, and then maybe what it looks like if you redirect some of that sunlight to the other side or even the underside of that person's face. It's going to look a lot better. Bring paper towels, bring clean cloths to wipe sweat off their brow, water so that they can quench their thirst, bug spray so they're not swatting at mosquitoes if you're anywhere near Delaware right now. I'm sure that that's going to be an issue for you, so bring the bug spray. And avoid filming in the hours between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. when the sun is at its harshest angles. And your secret sauce, the B-roll. Like we talked about earlier, get 5 to 10 seconds of B-roll showing detail. Sound is typically removed, so don't worry. You know, if there's noise in the background, if there's wind, you're going to remove that anyway and have your subject talking over it. You want to film in the same orientation that you're filming your original interview. Stills and cutaways, photos that are dropped in and appear seamlessly, or maybe pop in next to the person's head. You can use those as well to enhance your messaging. And these are really the secret sauce to success. It's fun to have a talking head. It's fun to see who is speaking, but it gets boring really fast. After a while, people are going to be wondering, I wonder what the crop that they're talking about looks like, or I wonder what that insect would look like. Show them. Don't leave them wondering. You want to show rather than tell. Your talking head is the teller, and then your B-roll is what's going to be showing, and showing is more important. Use the downtime in your film stock. Use your downtime to film stock scenes that you can use later. That's your B-roll. Animals, you might put your phone down and have an animal come up and investigate your phone. It looks better if you're not trying to manipulate them or holding them. It looks a little bit more natural. Let's say you're trying to get some film, maybe of deer. Maybe you want to leave your phone out for a little bit where you know they're going to be, maybe leave a little feed and see them come up to your phone. It looks nice. It looks natural. You're not, hopefully, not chasing any animals or trying to force them into a scene. That would be terrible. Equipment like tractors, planters, harvesters, machines. Get wide shots of them going through a field. Get close-up shots of somebody working the controls. Crops blowing in the wind, somebody hand picking a crop, maybe packing it, maybe cleaning it off, maybe shucking corn, maybe cooking it, pruning, cleaning things, any close-ups of what you're talking about. It's great to get people's hands working. If you include faces, that's fine as well, but typically you want to focus in on your subject. And if your subject is whatever somebody's doing with their hands, just focus on the hands when you're filming. Somebody's family, emphasize the family, show their children, maybe doing chores, outside scenes, behind the scenes with their families, things that look casual, and other things that you could film. Pollinators on plants, sunsets, building exteriors, different situations of weather, signage. If you're thinking ahead about maybe the next few videos that you want to make, and if you see something when you're out and about, go ahead and film it. It never hurts to have that extra B-roll, and it might be just the secret sauce that you need to take your video from just okay to incredible. So some great examples of B-roll was from Hicks Nurseries. We interviewed a farmer in one position, and the filmmaker actually used B-roll to show him driving, arriving home, walking through the field. It added a lot of extra context to the video that I'll send you a link to. Unfortunately, I don't think I can click on it the way we have our program set up today. But I want you to be able to see that just adding those extra little tidbits of video in can make a huge difference in your narrative style and how you're telling a story. If you can't shoot B-roll, maybe ask your subject to shoot some. If it's a day in the life video, ask them to film them at work, film panning across their desk, maybe their coworkers, the farm they work on. Something that's fun to do is find photos of the past of them if you're talking about the past. Maybe they're a farmer today and they were in 4-H or FFA. Find a picture of them when they were young and include that. That's a really neat touch to illustrate something that somebody said or who they were and who they've become. Do not have them text the footage. That is a big issue that I've found a lot of times, particularly when you're working with volunteers. The footage is on their phone and they think, okay, well, I'll send it to you. You want to instead have them upload it maybe to Google Drive from their phone, or send it in an email and make sure that they're checking the box that says largest file size, because when you text a photo to somebody, it does compress it a bit to be able to send it through the air, and it can come out the other end kind of looking like they took a picture with a potato. And it doesn't look great, and when you blow it up or try to use it on video, it's going to look horrific. So if you do ask a subject or maybe some volunteers to send you some video, have them upload it somewhere directly or send it in an email with the correct settings. Pan the scene slowly is a great tip. If you would like any additional information, please do let us know. This is information that we've put together specifically for all of you guys. And it's something that we are more than willing and more than happy to share. We have a list of things that you can buy. We have documents that we've given to volunteers that kind of explain some of the concepts in this that we can share with you, and you can rebrand and use in your own practices. So do please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if you just want to talk shop. Again, my name is Katie Young. You can also reach out to my colleague, Michelle Walfrid. We're both with the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension. And we hope you've gotten something out of today, and we hope to hear from you. Let's take a look at the questions.
Sure.
Oh, it looks like you've gotten to them, Shannon. Thank you so much. Yeah, the wind is the worst, huh?
It's just so distracting. And then people want to know about the presentation. So, Katie, if you can send me the slide set,
Absolutely. Sure
maybe
will.
compressed, if you can
Yes.
compress the photos, you can send me the slide set. And then everyone, you will be getting through Eventbrite where you registered, you'll be getting a link to the recording as well as a link to the slide set.
Yes, and we'll actually also send you a link to that list of recommended
Yes,
kind of starter kit items, because that's been very helpful for a lot of people, and we're pretty proud of it.
you should be. I've purchased some of those things and trying to read through, like when you Google like microphone for my, so
It's a
it
lot.
definitely
It's
is helpful.
absolutely a lot, and it can be quite overwhelming. Like we said, you don't want to go super cheap, but the most expensive items on the market are not always the best items. So we've identified that some that should be within your budget and work great.
Perfect. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions in here. Some thank yous. So
Thank you so
we
much, guys.
appreciate your time today. Thanks so
Thank you.
much. And
Thank you for your patience with my computer issues.
well, we all know it happens. And I thought it was a great kind of ironic. It was a technology one, but
You know, you have to roll with it.
exactly. Exactly. Perfect. All right. Well, thanks, Katie, so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.